Welcome to Nervous System Diaries. I am Soft Spoken Survivor. Diary entry number 3. Today I want to talk about the foundation of fear. When some people hear my story, they usually think about the abusive relationship I survived as an adult. But the truth is, my nervous system learned fear long before that. Fear was my first language. Some of my earliest memories aren't birthday parties or family vacations. They're memories of screaming. They're memories of adults fighting. They're memories of trying to sleep while chaos echoed through the house. As a little girl, I learned very quickly that adults could be unpredictable. My biological father drank heavily. Then my mother remarried. And my stepfather drank too. Alcohol seemed to be following me through childhood like a shadow. I remember lying in bed listening to arguments that seemed to last for forever. I remember the tension in the air, that feeling that something bad could happen at any moment. What I didn't understand was then that my body was learning to survive. When you're a child and your environment isn't safe, your nervous system adapts. You become hyper aware. You listen for footsteps. You learn the difference between ordinary conversations and the beginnings of a fight. You learn how to read moods before words are even spoken. You become a tiny detective because your safety depends on it. One memory that has stayed with me my entire life. I was waiting on my biological father to pick me up. I remember sitting in my room excited to see him. Then I heard shouting. The shouting became a fight. The fight became violence. For the first time in my life, I saw blood. I was probably only 4 or 5. I remember standing there confused while the adults fought around me. I remember seeing blood outside on the sidewalk. I also remember watching the rain as it washed away. I remember wondering why my dad left without me. That question stayed with me for years. Not because I understood what happened, but because children almost always blame themselves when adults fail them. The message I absorbed wasn't that the adults were struggling. The message I absorbed was, why wasn't I enough for someone to stay? As difficult as that memory was, it wasn't the only trauma happening in my life. I was being physically punished in ways that left marks on my body. I can still feel the red, bloody welts on the backs of my legs from switches in the yards that I used to get spanked with. I learned that pain could come from people who were supposed to protect me. I learned that adults could hurt you and still tell you they loved you. I learned that fear and love could exist in the same room. That lessons would shape many of my future relationships. Eventually, the bruises became impossible to ignore. My biological father and my stepmother noticed them. What followed was a custody battle that no child should ever have had to experience. Adults were fighting over me while I just wanted my life to make sense. I wanted my toys, my friends, my routine. I wanted to stop feeling torn in half. I saw blood for the second time when my mother tried to break into my father and stepmother's home through a window. My stepmother was reading me a book in the back bedroom and heard a commotion, told me to stay, and ran out into the living room. The door to the room that I was in didn't shut all the way, so I heard my mother screaming for me. I guess my father just said, "Take her." My mother had a bloody hand from smashing his window. I just remember fear. It was dark, and I was in the backseat of her car while my brother's dad drove us home. Then came one of the hardest moments of my childhood, the custody hearing. A judge asked me where I wanted to live. Imagine asking a scared child to make that decision that adults couldn't make themselves. I remember feeling terrified, a stranger, a judge in her chambers privately. She saw my fear and even took her robe off to make me feel safer. It didn't make me feel safer. I just remember I wanted it to end. I remember wanting everyone to stop fighting. I remember wanting to go home. I remember agreeing with a story that I knew wasn't true. You see, the bruises on the backs of my legs were from spankings I received with a leather belt that had the buckle still attached. I also got spankings bent over the bed, wearing only my underwear, by my brother's father, while my mother stood there watching. The story I agreed to, that my brother, who was much younger than me, and was clearly manipulated into telling, that I had fallen off the merry-go-round weeks prior. As an adult, what still hurts is that nobody seemed to recognize what was right in front of them. I went to the courthouse as an adult and looked at my case files. The photographs clearly show belt marks on the backs of my legs, yet somehow the explanation that made the adults comfortable became the official story. When you fall on your butt, not your legs. But I just had to go along with it because I felt like that's what was expected of me. Because I remember going into the bathroom before talking to the judge, and my mother was in there. And I feel like she bribed me with a pack of gum and, you're going to say the right things, aren't you? And stuff like that. And that scared me even more. And I think that's why I was so scared upon going into the judge's chamber. As an adult, I understand that children often do what they need to do to survive. Sometimes survival doesn't look like fighting back. Sometimes survival looks like staying quiet. Sometimes survival looks like telling adults what they want to hear. Sometimes survival looks like carrying secrets that were never yours to carry. Looking back now, I can see how these experiences shaped my nervous system. I wasn't born hypervigilant. I wasn't born anxious. I wasn't born expecting danger around every corner. I learned those things. My body learned them through years of unpredictability, fear, and confusion. The little girl I was did what she needed to do to survive. And while those survival skills helped me get through childhood, they followed me into adulthood. That's part of why I wanted to do this podcast. Understanding where those survival responses came from, understanding why our bodies react the way they do, and learning that healing isn't about blaming ourselves for how we adapted. It's about finally understanding why we adapted in the first place. And just like people who talk to me in everyday life, people always say that I'm so calm and I'm just go with the flow. After I escaped my 16 years of abuse, I started therapy. And they assessed me with the ACEs test. I had 7 out of 10 adult traumas. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. So the others didn't apply to me since I didn't use them for coping. I also had 9 out of 10 childhood traumas. One of the questions asked whether I had ever experienced sexual abuse. The honest answer is that I don't know. What I do know is that I have a recurring childhood memory that fills me with fear whenever it surfaces. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's a memory, a nightmare, or something my brain is trying to process. I only know when it comes up, my body reacts before my mind can. It's Santa Claus standing behind my bedroom door at my dad's house. Almost feel like I want to vomit every single time I think about this. I know my blankets were off of me and my nightgown was pulled up past my waist, but I don't recall anything else. Also, at some point in my adult life, I did reach out to my mother once or twice. And she always said that I was a different child when I came back from visiting my dad. She said I was quiet, and it took me a few days to get me back to the chatty little girl. Now as an adult, I reflect back and say, who was there to protect me? An innocent child. The answer is nobody. I had myself. That's where I learned to stop asking for help. That's where I learned to stay quiet. That's where I learned to shrink myself and become whatever anyone else wanted me to be. and to do everything right like it was some sort of science just to survive. I spent my childhood learning how to survive. I spent my adulthood learning why. And now I'm learning something new, how to live. I have a voice now, and I intend to use it. Thank you for being here. I know this was a tough one, but these are my truths. Come back next week for another diary entry. I'm a soft-spoken survivor, and this is the Nervous System Diaries.